This is about a coup. This is about regime change. It's about violent regime change so that we can control Venezuela's oil. President Trump said, no, the president of Venezuela is not the president. The president is really somebody else. And he named some other person. The U.S. named some other person.
Jeffrey Sachs just revealed what's at the heart of Trump's desire for regime change in Venezuela, and in this clip he gets into the history of US-Venezuela relations, showing that this isn't just a new cause. It goes back to the first Trump administration, to Obama, and all the way back to 2002. He also gets into why what Lindsey Graham is saying about Venezuela is so indistinguishable from Trump himself. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
By what international or legal standard can the American government declare that the Maduro government is illicit and that someone else is actually the president of Venezuela?
The United States does not care about international law, and it's very important for Americans to understand this. The United States foreign policy is different from just about every other country in the world. When other countries deal with the governments that they don't like, they might have to negotiate with them. They may have to react to them. The United States instead typically tries to overthrow those governments. This is an absolutely reckless and failed policy that is completely lawless. Gets the United States into endless wars, destabilizes countries, and Venezuela is on the list right now. It's been on the list actually for more than 20 years. The US government has actively, over the course of 23 years since 2002, been trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela. And they're at it right now. They have tried many, many things which have created incredible instability, millions of refugees, destroying the Venezuelan economy. But for American officials, this is kind of a game. This is the game that we play. And this is the game that Trump played all through the first term. Biden did it as well. And now we're seeing Trump escalate further.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. This has been a cause of the U.S. for over 20 years, going back to 2002, where Hugo Chavez was overthrown for something like 47 days, removed from power under the support of the United States. You have the heroes at antiwar.com covering this story for many, many years, with Ted Snyder's document here showing this. You'll remember, if you remember these times, that the Bush administration actually lied about this and said they played no part in this attempted overthrow of Chavez. But then, information trickled out. Documents that were released showed that the U.S. met with opposition leaders from that time. They also slapped sanctions upon the Venezuela regime in the mid-2010s. Those always harm the populace of Venezuela and not the government. And it's been a cause since the first Trump administration, where Trump recognized Juan Guaido as the real leader of Venezuela, sending him $52 million and trying to instigate an overthrow of Venezuela at that time, too. If you remember, Tulsi Gabbard was very much opposed to this at the time. I played clips about that in other stories. So Sachs is right here.
They declare an emergency under an Emergency Powers Act. Is it an emergency for the U.S.? Is it a national security emergency? Of course it's not. But it's a claim by the United States that we can do what we want. And what does what we want mean? It means crushing the economy of Venezuela. It means destroying the healthcare system. It means creating a high inflation to kill living standards and life conditions. It means creating millions of refugees
Yeah, it does. It does mean all that, but again, Venezuela's wrecked their own economy too through a brand of socialist central planning as well. So I don't want to say it's all because of the U.S., and it is partially because of the U.S. slapping incredibly harsh sanctions on Venezuela that, again, harm the people that live there rather than the government. Actually, it gives the government a propaganda tool so that they can say, hey, it's only the U.S. that's at fault here for wrecking our economy, when it's really the absurd central planning and desecration of trade, government monopolies and the collectivization of the means of production that is and has been wrecking Venezuela as well. That's not to take any justification, and culpability off the U.S., but that's at play too. I just want that to be known.
It means, by the way, as you said, in one particularly weird moment, January 2019, President Trump said, no, the president of Venezuela is not the president. The president is really somebody else. And he named some other person. The U.S. named some other person as president of Venezuela. And then it said that person now controls the financial assets of Venezuela, thinking that in Washington, you don't like the government, you declare who's president. Mm-hmm.
And that sounds insane, but that's exactly what happened in 2019 when the U.S. government, again, recognized that Juan Guaido, the opposition leader in Venezuela, is actually the president. He's the real president, and Maduro is just a farce. He's a phony. And that's who we're going to recognize. This is what the Trump administration tried to do in his first term. So this isn't unprecedented. Even within Trump and his administrations, again, it goes back more than 20 years. So Sachs is right. This is how the U.S. operates. This is how the U.S. does business. And it's not enough to just have entangling alliances with foreign powers, that being destructive to the U.S., like it is in Israel and Ukraine and Saudi Arabia. But you have to actually have entangling alliances with factions within these countries too. It's just so treacherous, and it never pays off. It's never beneficial, and it's a total part of the neocon plan that Trump pretended to be against on the campaign trail.
In that country,
there's a federal statute that defines emergency as paraphrasing it now, a sudden and unexpected event which adversely affects the national security or economic stability of the United States. It's almost inconceivable to me that these declarations of emergency, whether it's Obama or Trump, comply with that. Not to aggravate you all the more, but your favorite senator from South Carolina opined on all this in a rather reckless and irritating way yesterday on Face the Nation. Chris?
We looked at the JAG manual. Preventative self-defense employed to counter non-imminent threats is illegal under international law. So if we are not at war and these suspected criminals pose no threat of imminent violence, isn't this potentially a war crime to be killing the people on these boats and then to be taking out a leader?
His first reaction is to laugh. Just think of that before anything else is said. Just laughing about the inability to comply with what the Constitution says about waging wars and declaring wars.
No, not at all. I don't know what manual you're referring to, but I know what President Bush 41 did. He took down Ortega, the leader of Panama, because he was involved in drug trafficking, threatening our country. Venezuela is now partnering with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is running out of money because Iran is weak.
But I thought it was drug trafficking. He pivots to Hezbollah. And by the way, the links to Hezbollah with Venezuela seem to be specious, but even if they did exist, Hezbollah hasn't attacked the United States. There is no threat to the United States, not whatsoever. The threat really comes from within our own gates, from within our own government, supervillain neocons like Lindsey Graham that want us to get embroiled in all these regime change operations. And just to float that out as propaganda, pivoting from the idea of it being a narco-terrorism situation, which was absurd, and they have to get away from because none of the fentanyl that comes in the United States comes from Venezuela, and a minuscule amount of the cocaine from that comes into the United States comes from Venezuela. So they have to pivot, but this is a farcical pivot.
That's not new.
Partnering with drug cartels in Venezuela. No, it should have stopped. Here's what's new. You got a commander-in-chief that's not going to put up with this crap. We're not going to sit on the sidelines and watch boats full of drugs come to our country. We're going to blow them up and kill the people that want to poison America. And we're now going to expand operations, I think, to the land. So please be clear about what I'm saying today. President Donald Trump sees Venezuela and Colombia as direct threats to our country.
Then he's insane and you're insane. And it's crazy how easily the neocons have steered this administration by just stroking Trump's ego. They found out the way to do that from the first administration. Stroke Trump's ego and then he'll exacerbate the wars like he did in Yemen and Syria and ramped up the bombing in Afghanistan for a while too. Credit to him for trying to withdraw troops at the end of his term. But that's the truth, and Lindsey Graham's mastered the art. Trump has chosen Lindsey Graham, the cretin, the blood-soaked neocon villain, over heroes like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and Marjorie Taylor Greene on these issues.
Because they house narco-terrorist organizations. The leader of Venezuela is an indicted drug dealer in American courts. So yeah, the game is changing when it comes to drug traffickers and drug cartels. We're going to use military force like we have in the past to protect our country. That's the new game we're playing, and I'm glad we're playing that game. And if I were Maduro, I'd find a way to leave before he goes down.
It's indistinguishable from Paul Wolfowitz and, the vile neocons that steered us into Iraq. You might as well call this president George W. Trump if he's going to embrace this nonsense and buy into it. But of all accounts, in his own words, he has bought into this.
This is stomach churning. What is your understanding of the root cause, the true reason the United States has been trying to destabilize Venezuela for the past 20 years?
Well, it's obvious. Venezuela has the world's largest reserves of oil. We're trying to steal them, pure and simple. It's not even complicated. This has nothing to do with narcotics trafficking at all. This is an insult to our intelligence to watch this smirking gangster discuss this way. He's the one, by the way, Lindsey Graham's the one who says, oh, we got to fight in Ukraine because they have $10 trillion of minerals. He's just a simple gangster who works in an organized crime mob called the U.S. government. And the smirk on his face. Lady, you don't think we can murder the people we want to murder? Are you so naive? Do I have to sit for an interview on Face the Nation and explain to you we can murder whoever we want? And we can give any explanation that we want? We can say they're narcotics traffickers. By the way, when Obama put on these orders and when Trump followed up on these orders in 2015 and in 2019, it had nothing to do with narcotics trafficking. That's just the excuse of the day.
He's so right about that. That's the propaganda. Rand Paul said it straight when the boats that they're gunning down right now would have to refuel 20 times to even get to the U.S. coast. This is absurd. Fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela, but that's part of the propaganda line. You heard Lindsey Graham talk about narco-terrorism and connections to Hezbollah, which, by the way, hasn't attacked the United States and is not a threat to the United States. He's so right. What we see here is a attempt on the part of the military-industrial complex and big energy to collude with the Trump administration, lay down a new money laundering scheme to get the U.S. contractors in there, take the oil, profit from the oil, and do this through centralized planning and empire-building schemes. This would be a Halliburton 2.0. Some people might not be old enough watching this to remember this, but that's what happened in the Iraq War too. And we shouldn't pretend otherwise. So Sachs is exactly right.
They've been trying to bring down this government for more than 20 years. And they will murder. They will make inland incursions, so-called. It's called an invasion. And they'll do that, and they'll smirk. And he'll laugh. And he'll threaten, like a gangster, you better get out of there because we're going to clean this up. And we have the right to do it. We are the United States of America.
Yeah, remember when Trump trashed Liz Cheney for favoring regime change and saying that, hey, if she was in the front lines, she wouldn't favor the wars that she supported historically? It seems like a million years ago, but that was only 10 months ago. And then you have this administration stroking the flames of war yet again, getting the war machine lubed up and ready to move again, allowing the propaganda to serve as the precursor to that. It's unconscionable, but that's America First now, under this tarnished brand of America First. I say hogwash. I say America only. This is bunk. We shouldn't accept it as Americans.
And where does this get us? It gets us war after war after war. So much for MAGA. So much for peace president. Yeah, come on. This is gangsterism. And so it's in full view. Yeah. And by the way, please, somebody in the Congress, in the courts, in the United States, in the media, say something about this unbelievably vulgar and illegal mobilization of the American military for this ongoing attempt to grab Venezuela's oil.
Thomas Massie and Rand Paul are your man, Sachs. They have, but the few people that have done that in Washington that are representatives, that are senators, are way too few and far between. That is true. It needs to be more of an overwhelming effort to counter this nonsense, the worst excesses of the Bush administration neocon nonsense that we still feel as being influential in Washington today.
So the president was asked on Friday if he would consult with the Congress before going further. You will not be happy with his answer. I'm sure you know what it is already, but here's what he said. Chris?
And Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay, we're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay. Yeah.
And just think of that. Tulsi Gabbard was right there sitting next to him. Look at this. Tulsi Gabbard on the left there has been a big critic of regime change operations and perverting the constitutional requirements for Congress to declare war, not the president. Just sits there. I don't know how you don't just scoff at that visibly, viscerally, if you're someone like Tulsi Gabbard who built her political career on opposing regime change nonsense. But now she's on the inside. She's part of the deep state. She's the head of the deep state as the national security director. She was particularly critical, by the way, of the Trump administration in 2019. When the Trump administration was attempting regime change by citing that, hey, Juan Guaido is the real leader of Venezuela, and she didn't want to put up with that. I've seen, basic silence from her and everyone else in this administration, and yeah, it's a different game when you're on the inside, but it sure seems like she's been compromised or silenced in this entire thing, and it's pretty darn sickening if you ask me.
With that cavalier attitude, A, about human life, B, about the Constitution, C, about federal law, D, about international law, is just reprehensible. I don't remember hearing anything that cavalier, even from George W. Bush right after 9/11. I don't want to compare presidents, but what we have now is a person who believes that might makes right, figuratively and literally.
He believes in murder, and
yes.
Murder from the Oval Office of the United States of America. But more than that, we need to understand this is not about narcotics trafficking, as I said. This is about a coup. This is about regime change. It's about violent regime change so that we can control Venezuela's oil.
Yeah, certainly seems to be the case. I agree with Jeffrey Sachs wholeheartedly. This was a great breakdown of where U.S. relations with Venezuela are, the regime change plot that's unfolding before our eyes proceeded with this propaganda campaign. And that reporter's question was actually very reasonable and good toward Trump. Like, if you have both houses of Congress under your party's control, you're very popular amongst your base in Congress and the national lobbies that support you, why not just get a war declaration? Wouldn't that be the easiest thing in the world to do that? Well, he doesn't want that because he wants an abstract, open-ended military operation that isn't a war. He wants to continue to profit from this for years in advance after taking these oil reserves through wealthy U.S. contractors that are given special contracts, some of which are no bid, like Halliburton got a no bid contract in 2003 to do the same thing. That's exactly what this is. It's just repeating the same neocon playbook, just with different branding. This is neocon rebranded. There's no difference in the Cheneys and the Rumsfeld and the Wolfowitz and the David Wurmsers and the Richard Pearls and how they pitched regime change and the benefits that would lead to. It's just under different branding. So for all the raking over the coals that Trump ever did to the neocons, trashing them, indicting John Bolton even, having words to say about Liz Cheney, he still is embracing that same neocon foreign policy in the Oval Office, not getting a war declaration despite correctly dragging Joe Biden for not doing that when it came to targeted strikes against the Iranian regime in various locations in Syria and in Iraq, and also, just completely condemning and denouncing Biden for having the nerve to ramp up bombing in Yemen when he did the exact same thing throughout all of March, started a new war with Iran, no war declaration there. What do you know? It's the neocon policy we still get regardless of who you vote for, and that's why my good friend Tom Woods says, no matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. You always get Benjamin Netanyahu, too. I'm sorry to say, it seems to be. But that's the sad truth. And that will be the truth until our localities withhold National Guard units, withhold resources from the national military establishment, past Defend the Guard, stand up and have a mass education campaign about the worst ramifications of this foreign policy regime. And until the Israel lobby dies out and it's in its death throes, according to the populace, but not according to the political class, still wields a lot of power. But we're on a good trajectory on the latter thing, but on the first two things, we need to do a better job. And hopefully that will happen. Hopefully there will be a mass awakening when the U.S. can't exactly continue this unsustainable course of debt, $38 trillion in debt now, and explosive inflation that isn't even counted correctly because they use the CPI as the measuring stick of that when it doesn't include all the inflationary markets that Americans are suffering the costs of right now. But that's where we're at. Do you agree with Jeffrey Sachs? Is this all for the oil? Why is this a regime change being pushed so hard right now? And is the neocons successfully steering Trump throughout this administration? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Awesome interview. Thank you, Judge. If you like this video, also please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. It would mean the world to me if you support me that way, and I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube if you do that. Also, if you want a very free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It's at libertyvault.net. To get that free copy, that is my history of how the U.S. went from a very decentralized League of States into a centrally planned juggernaut, hell-bent on empire building, to the perversion of the Founding Fathers and what they had intended for this country. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.